Artificial intelligence has the potential to transform just about every sector of the economy, from healthcare and trade to education, agriculture, and the list goes on. That's why governments need a plan that mitigates risk to society while also seizing the opportunities that AI will bring. It's a massive challenge, and generally, it takes years. One of the countries that's crafted a national AI policy is Rwanda. The tiny African nation wants to be the leading hub on the continent for the development and deployment of ethical and trustworthy AI tech. Their policy frameworks outline these aspirations and also lay out a roadmap for achieving that vision. In the latest installment of our oral history project, we meet a young woman who's one of the key figures behind these policies. I'm Jennifer Strong, and this is Shift.
Now here on the steering column is a device called Auto Cruise. You simply set the speed you want.
Self-driving robo-taxis are already on the road in US cities.
As the disc rotates, a mirror reflects the light in the way that depends on how the signal was recorded.
This is the 100 terabyte. I present to you Electro, the Moto Man.
Ladies and gentlemen.
I would say that one of my greatest skills is my ability to interact with humans.
Throughout this series, we'll be featuring the stories of breakthroughs and other key moments in emerging tech, as told by those who witnessed them.
Hackers and cybercriminals have always held this kind of special fascination.
Obviously, I can't tell you too much about what I do.
It's a game. Who's the best hacker? And I was like, well, this is child's play.
I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and on the Click Here podcast, you'll meet them and the people trying to stop them.
We're not afraid of the attack. We're afraid of the creativity and the intelligence of the human being behind it.
Click Here, stories about the people making and breaking our digital world.
AI machines, satellite, engine ignition,
Click Here,
and liftoff.
Every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
I think like with all this, it's almost like it's doom waiting to happen. But when you see the effect some of these technologies really have on people's lives, it's worth it really working on the hard problems. My name is Esther Kunda, and I'm the Director General in charge of Innovation and Emerging Technologies in the government of Rwanda. And what I do on a daily basis is really working on policies, advocacy, and initiatives around startup ecosystem, digital financial services, and emerging technologies. And as broad as you may think, everything, I cover everything. But I'm only 33, just turned 33. Years old, so still a long way, but I've been in the tech industry since early 2010s, and that's when I was finishing my undergrad. I studied computer science, and then I went on to be in the first class of Carnegie Mellon when they established here in Rwanda in 2012. It was a really fun moment to be among the first 25 students. And then from there, I've been able to be in the private sector, created companies. I love building products, but also I like really making connection around how can you build products, research knowledge that can enable people to live better lives and grow themselves and live really well. If you're fancy, you can say, please bring me my Starbucks in a drone. That'll be fine with them. But in a country like Rwanda, everything has to have a purpose and it has to deliver impact. In any country, you see how it is very hard to get donation of blood. It makes sense when you compare costs of losing the blood that someone has donated to actually getting it to a mother who's having complication when they're delivering their child in a remote hospital in Rwanda. So we can say we'll wait 25 years to have really good roads everywhere in Rwanda. But that mother needs to be there to see that infrastructure happen. Or we get to a point where all our health centers are really well equipped to be able to have the blood stored on premise, be able to collect the blood donation, but we're not yet there yet. So it's really amazing that when you talk to a doctor in a remote area, they know that they don't have to worry about blood today, anywhere in Rwanda. And that's one good step towards having Rwandans that are really living well. So I think hopefully, especially for people who are passionate about building technology, I'd encourage them to see how some of these technology have good impact and wonderful impact on people's lives. And that's why we always have to fight to have the hard conversation. And if you've really figured out how to make artificial intelligence, it shouldn't be hard to figure out how not for it to harm people. Like you're intelligent enough. We can assume you're intelligent enough to have these hard conversations. So I think for me, that's what I would encourage. The African tech ecosystem is one of the fastest in the world that is growing and really picking up. So from that premise, there's so many technologies that are coming in. So we've seen people start with financial digital payments. Today, in most African countries, you can go anywhere, you pay with your mobile phone, or what we call mobile money. This was before Apple Pay. So when we started looking at what AI can do, a few years back, we had a project with the Mozilla Foundation, and it's a project called Common Voice. Muganda in Kinyarwanda is community work. It's also part of our culture in saying every last Saturday of the month, we have to collectively come and do community work as a whole country. So in that particular project, what happened was we were trying to collect voice data sets for Kinyarwanda to be used in AI models, especially for deep speech and other technologies as may see fit. 5 years ago, we also had Zipline come in. We are currently using drones to supply about 80% of our health centers receive blood and other medical products using drones across the country. We had other companies that were also trying to do a lot of AI in healthcare, especially whether it's in triage or other aspects. So we started seeing products. And that's really because we've positioned ourselves to be a proof of concept hub. And the main reason is a few things. One, Rwanda is a landlocked and tiny market, and it's very rare for a company, global tech company, to think about Rwanda in where they're deploying technology. For example, there's critical infrastructure that the likes of Google, the likes of Apple, the likes of Spotify and Netflix, like some of these things, we actually do not have them because the companies don't seem to recognize the tiny markets like ours. That's one perspective. But also the other one is saying, us being extra small, if we go and absorb a mature solution, it will take a lot of infrastructure, it will take a lot of investment for us to actually absorb it. So one of the easiest avenue is to actually be part of creating that knowledge, be part of creating an enabling environment, whether it's legal regulation, and understand what is required to do that so that we can be beneficiary of that knowledge, whether it's our own people who are creating that knowledge or other inventors and innovators from across the world. So that's our thinking at the moment. And we have several aspects: agriculture, financial services, and healthcare is some of the critical aspects. And now climate change, some of the critical sectors that we really want to see innovation emerge and be able to help us solve some of the challenges that we have in those sectors. So then actually during COVID, we, as a government, we made a decision to say, let's go ahead and start creating this policy. And that was also after we created a Center for AI and Policy Initiative. And that center really was to be able to advise on policy initiatives, but also support on interventions within the AI and other emerging technology implementation, really coming into every aspect of our life. That economic impact, that lifestyle impact that AI would have on a citizen who's not even aware, and they're in the rural parts of Rwanda, they might not even be digitally literate, but there's systems that are deciding, that are AI based, that are deciding if they get social protection, if they get all these things. What if we get to that point right? So we need to have that policy. And the policy is for us to learn, but also put in front what our aspiration is. And most of our aspiration is to provide responsible AI solutions for our citizens. Our policy is usually, so the government says this is the direction we're taking, but it's also different from a law, which is binding by everyone. And what we've said is we have this policy to give us direction on how do we want to approach AI as a government, but also what do we want to signal to the market on how, as Rwanda, we want AI solutions to be part of our world. And that's the main premise. So if you're a business, you see that this is what government would like. If you're a business that is in AI, you see this is the direction the government is taking. We've also put guidelines, and we've not put regulations for simple elements. And that's because we want to first see how mature the market is. The AI ecosystem is so volatile and it changes every single day. So for both public and private sector, for us to be able to understand what AI is, how it permeates into our society, we need to take those steps. But also there's challenges and fundamental challenges that we need to solve for us before we start going to businesses and telling them, you're not doing AI, because it's also, you have to balance between tell someone, it's like, yes, be responsible, but also on the other hand, you have to see how does AI evolves in society.
We'll be back right after this.
Because you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're interested in staying on top of the latest trends, news, and more. So I want to tell you about another show. It's called Web3 with A6NC Crypto, but it's really about the future of the internet, future of creators, future of business, future of the way we work and live. It's for anyone seeking to understand the latest tech trends direct from experts with high insights per minute, given your time and attention are so valuable. Follow Web3 with A6NC in your podcast app now.
We've done a generic definition of AI, but one of the key things that we've looked at is, in the context of Rwanda, what does AI really mean? What do we need? When we started doing, the term generative AI was not there. That was in early 2020, I think, and very few people were talking about what is generative AI. No one thought it was going to be something. By the time we passed the law, ChatGPT was there. Everyone was now on generative AI, saying this is something now we don't understand how. So when we started, it was still, repetitive tasks are the ones that are going to be mostly affected by AI in the mainstream media. But then when you go, by the time we ended that, it was now another story. So what we've really done is saying, okay, in the context of Rwanda, what do we want to know? How do we want to go about it? And how we approach it is keeping in mind that we want to be a proof of concept. We still want to be able to say we enable research and knowledge creation around AI. And the first thing we looked at is how do we create enough talent and skilled people who understand AI, and in all facets, whether you're looking at economists, whether you're looking at people being upskilled, if you're doing a secretary job, how do you upskill yourself to include AI in your job, but also just pure researchers, pure technical skills in that aspect. And I think we use then most of our universities to come up with such programs. The second part is around data and compute capacity. The early discourse on AI was, which data did you train these models on, right? Unfortunately, you'd find that most of our countries do not have good data that you can fit into these AI models, right? So inherently, very few AI solutions are actually going to come with a fair assumption or a fair outlook on how we live in Rwanda. So if you're doing medical diagnostic, it's very rarely that I would trust what that AI is telling a doctor in a rural area in Rwanda, We've seen cases in the justice sector because we don't have that data collected. We don't have that data available. So that's one of the biggest challenge that we have to actually, at a global level, try to understand how do we solve that. The second part is around compute capacity. If you look at the amount of data that models are trained on, it's a lot. The compute capacity is enormous, and it's a massive investment. For a tiny country like Rwanda, you will never tell Amazon would they put a data center there? They'll tell you no, we can go on the cloud. But then how are we treating AI models that are being trained on personal data, on critical data like financial service data of a country? How is that being governed? Or how are these multinationals actually thinking about that, right? So if you correlate all these conversations, it's a question that we still have to answer. Recently, I was reading that OpenAI spends about $700,000 a day on training ChatGPT. People need to eat, people need to sleep, people need to be in a home that is lit. Why would a government spend $700,000 a day on that much compute capacity? And most of these multinationals are not going to make an effort to invest and collect this data, unfortunately. But even when they collect that data, the problem of intellectual property comes in and ownership of that data. Like philosophically, we need to answer those questions, and at a global level, we need to really be answering these questions, because if I have a Samsung phone, if I have an iPhone, I'm consenting to provide my data, right? And the service provider is not thinking about me when they're building all these systems. So this is one thing that we were really thinking when we were putting together the policy. We also work with a lot of development partners. And most of them now, when they think about AI, they're trying to invest in use cases. So, and I think at a global level, that's what we wanted to do, to say, for us, this is what we think is very, very important, that we need to upscale, reskill, and create the right talent and knowledge within Rwanda and across Africa. Really deeply think and work on having the right data infrastructure, having the right auditing processes, and everything that goes in around that. Compute capacity, hopefully at some point we can have the right governance, the right partnership, the right legal instruments around compute capacity for AI. And then I believe the solutions we have, they're already demonstrating their usefulness where they can be applicable. And then lastly, I think responsible and ethical AI, however broad and undefined those two words become, because how I define ethics and how you define ethics might be completely different. This is also a global conversation, especially when you think about how UN systems at a political level, these are the main conversation. How do we define ethics? How do we define responsible? And how do we make companies and governments accountable for not being responsible and ethical? Those are still unanswered questions. And hopefully with us having that policy, we can start to be part of that conversation. And people who are creating AI solutions can also start to, let me call it, considerate. If I was to say, let me solve two things. One, I would want to have the best researchers come and work on that particular problem. How do we get to the most efficient, environmentally friendly compute infrastructure that we can put in Rwanda? If we can get to that and sit down and say we have the best people in the room and they're really cracking at this and they're working on it, that would be wonderful. Because I think then in the next 5-10 years, we should be able to get them. But there's also a policy solution. And for me, the way I always look at it is we have Interpol, right? And we figured out how to work with Interpol at a global level. Sometimes some countries don't play ball, but there's a bit of consensus on how that works. And I think with technologies like AI, this is also something that we have to seriously put on the table. If you think about AI, for example, you cannot have an atomic bomb and just detonate it anywhere you want, because whether it's in your country or outside of your country, you're liable for that. So if you're building an AI solution, and especially something that might affect people's mental health, something that might affect people's just normal health, that might affect their geopolitics, that might affect food production, it is very, very important that we find a way, a legal framework on how the world collaborates on these questions. And we have precedents on how the world has come to an understanding. It's not always perfect, but at least when someone goes outside of that consensus, they're very aware that they've gone outside of that consensus.
This show is produced by me and Anthony Green with help from Emma Cillekens. It's mixed by Garret Lang with original music from him and Jacob Gorski. Thanks for listening. I'm Jennifer Strong.
From PRX.